Hey folks, my name is Norb, and today I'll be sharing my thoughts on the Meze Empyrean Elite and what I'd wish I'd known before reviewing these. Meze Audio did let me borrow these for this video, but all thoughts are my own. There's a link in the description to Meze Audio's site that covers some of what I may have missed, but note that that link is an affiliate link. Before getting into what I wish I knew, let's go over what you get with these. First, a case is normal, but this looks like something that I should have handcuffed to me if I'm taking it out anywhere. It's aluminum and not particularly heavy, but it definitely is a statement piece, and that makes sense because the Empyrean Elite sell for $4,000 in the US. In the case were the headphones, 2 sets of ear pads, and a 3.5mm cable. The headphones themselves are beautiful, with a super flexible carbon fiber and leather headband, an aluminum frame that's made out of a single piece of solid aluminum, and an aluminum grill that's coated with a material that helps with the durability. The Elite are open back isodynamic or planar magnetic headphones. These drivers tend to be heavy, but Renaro, the company that designed these with Meze, made the drivers just 75 grams or 2.6 ounces. The materials Meze used were pretty light, so these come in at just 420 grams or 14.8 ounces. The weight and the shape of the headband plus a soft clamping force made them super comfortable to wear for hours without any sort of discomfort, which is a surprise to me because most planar headphones tend to be on the heavier side. That all said, here's what I wish I knew. The first thing I wish I knew was just how sensitive the Elite are to their sources, and here's what I mean by that. For starters, they're super easy to drive, 32 ohms, which means that you can plug them into your phone with a cheap $10 dongle, or to your iPod or your mini disc or a tape player and get a good, strong sound out of these. But not all sources are created equal, and some of them will color sound a certain way or deliver distortion at certain levels. Now, I tested these with my phone and an Apple dongle, a MacBook Pro, a Q-Delix 5K, an iFi XDSD Griffin wireless DAC amp, and a Cord Mojo 2 portable DAC amp. In every one of these cases, the headphones sounded excellent, but also slightly different. For example, with the Apple dongle connected straight to my phone, I got sound that was clear, resonant, and extremely detailed without it being offensive. No coloration, just the flat response, just the sound of the headphones. But as I moved up the source chain, as I connected the Elite to better and better sources, the soundstage got wider, the resolution got much better, and the low-level detail was far more noticeable. I also started noticing that I could easily pick out the tuning differences with each of the sources. For example, when I connected it to my iFi Griffin, the source got notably warmer. Now, the Griffin tends to sound a little warmer than it does analytical, and that was subtle but obvious when using the Elite. On the other hand, I was able to get a bit more detail using the Cord Mojo 2, which runs around the same price. The Elite are a neutral, warm sounding headphone, especially with the Alcantara ear pads on, so it didn't sound clinical or analytical at all unless I used the Mojo's EQ options. Even with that, the Elite sounded accurate but relaxing. By the way, if you want to hear more about my comparisons between the Griffin and the Mojo 2, I'll leave a link in the description. Now, the big reason I wish I'd known this is because I feel that to get the best and most out of the Elite, you need better equipment than what I have. The jump in quality from source to source was immediately noticeable, and after talking about these to some folks in my audiophile groups, they all said the same thing. They sounded great with everything, but sounded better and better with higher end equipment. Still, even with what I had, the Elite can deliver so much detail and information that I was never unsatisfied. The next thing I wish I knew was how these would change what I expect out of other headphones. Here I'm talking about presentation and frequency response. Let's start with the general sound. It's a smooth sound throughout, from the lowest bass to the highest treble. These have a pretty neutral presentation throughout. The bass presentation is strong but tight, the mids are warm without being muddy at all, and the highs are clear but relaxed. The sound overall I describe as a crisp and well-controlled sound while still being comfortable. These come with 2 sets of ear pads. One is a soft leather and the other one is Alcantara. These are super easy to swap since they're just magnetized. The Alcantara ear pads are slightly thicker than the standard leather ear pads, but the big difference for me was the sound. The Alcantara pads will warm up the sound a little bit by attenuating the highest frequencies. To me, this came off as making the sound slightly less realistic because it reduced the vibrance of the harmonic sequence response. Now, I've talked about this before, but when you sing or you play a note in an instrument, you're not just hearing that one note, you're hearing a bunch of other notes above that. Those are called harmonics. If you attenuate those, if you mute them some, then the sound will sound a little bit close, especially at the high end. The more you do it, the more muffled the sound gets. The Alcantara ear pads changed this region just enough that it made voices, especially women's vocals and anything in a concert hall like an opera, sound a little too closed for my taste, without a bit of EQ to the upper treble. That's because with that, you get a more natural presentation of the harmonic series. Too much of that gives way to sibilance, so I can see why Meze avoided this. On the other hand, I was completely satisfied with the bass on these. It was powerful and physical, but well controlled, and I never felt myself really wanting for more. In fact, I was listening to some of the Vince Guaraldi recordings for the Charlie Brown movies, and the sound of the double bass and the feel of the vibration was so natural that it felt as if I was plucking the instrument myself. It was really cool. So going back to what I wish I knew, here's how these change what I expect out of other headphones. For starters, easy to replace magnetic ear pads. There, switched. That just needs to be the default. And the ability to use other materials too, because it changes the experience so much and it helps with the longevity of the headphones. Put this back. There you go. Beyond that, during my testing, I put these up against both the Focal Clear and the Hi-Fi Man Ananda Stealth. These both retailed for about a quarter of the price, but both are excellent in their own right. Those used to be my standard bearers of what great sound was, and now, well, this level of clarity, detail, and depth, along with this smooth tuning, will be the standard for how I judge all other headphones, relative to the price. The next thing I wish I knew is whether you're finding this informative or useful. If you are, please remember to hit like and subscribe if you want more content like this, and let me know in the comments what you think. The next thing I wish I knew was just how much these would remind me of being back in music school, especially when it came to imaging and soundstage. When I was back in school, I spent about 2 years during my degree studying electronic music and music production. And I studied the techniques different artists would use in their studio recording, especially the Beatles. My teachers loved the Beatles, but I was a bigger fan of Michael Jackson. One thing Jackson used to do, for example, was record every instrument and voice with 2 microphones in stereo. And his recordings would routinely have something like 96 channels, which is a lot. He did that so that he could contour the sound in each song. If you listen to his song Human Nature, you can hear this in action, with instruments bouncing back and forth, or being panned on each side in order to make space within the audio in the middle. But it's all really subtle, which is why I loved hearing the Elite so clearly presenting these details, this image of the studio. His song, Man in the Mirror, is also good for this. Another good piece for this is Prince's When Doves Cry. The Elite have a lovely sensitivity that really lets you hear the layering of the chorus and where each of the voices is placed, no matter how subtle. So here's why I'm saying all this. In school, we used to record our music and we needed to pre-plan the mix before recording, then monitor to make sure there wasn't any distortion in any of the channels. But those channels gave us a space to really contour how the stage would look like in the imagination of the audience. And I hadn't really thought about that in years, not until using the Elite. Of course, no conversation about imaging can be complete without talking a little bit about video games and movies. In this case, just video games. Let me just say that if you're just getting the Elite for video games, you can save your money and get something cheaper that is just as good, if not better, for that. But if you also want to use this for video games, then you're going to love these. For my test, I had these plugged in directly to my PlayStation 5 controller and started playing Horizon Forbidden West. There wasn't one part of that experience I didn't love, outside of having to go into the menus to control the volume. The next thing I wish I knew was that not all planar magnetic headphones sound artificial. Some can really sound organic and natural. Exhibit A. Being transparent, I tend to prefer dynamic drivers to planar magnetic drivers because all too often planar sound artificial to me. The sound is too tight, too clean, and unless you pump a lot of power through them, you often don't get the proper resonance. That was not the case with the Elite. Going back to the Vince Guaraldi pieces, I felt an incredible effortlessness in listening to these. The saxophone, the guitar, the double bass, the piano, and even the drum set. The attack on each was crisp without being sharp, and the tone was smooth without being artificial. The decay that came after felt generally natural with a touch of warmth. These don't sound organic in the same way that a dynamic driver does, but that wasn't a bad thing, and the decay and resonance really took advantage of the low-level detail that these are able to offer. Peter Gabriel's album I.O. has been one of my favorites this year, and when I first put these on to test them, I sat with them for 2 hours just going through both the bright side and dark side mixes of that album. And as I wrote the script for this video, I did it again. Each time, it felt like the first time. Overall, I can't get over just how good the details are on the Elite without sounding either sibilant or harsh. It's just clean throughout. And the final thing I wish I knew before reviewing the Elite is how much I would enjoy these with electronic music. As I said earlier, I prefer acoustic, And you've already heard me talk about jazz and folk and a bit of rock, but electronic music is usually hit or miss with me. I either love it or I hate it. With these, the slightly recessed higher treble and solid bass made for a fun and lively listen that could also be relaxing, no matter if I was listening to Johan Johansson or Daft Punk. Same with hard rock and metal. It's hit or miss with me, with a lot of it just feeling exhausting because so much of it often just devolves into this wall of sound. But with these, the finer details of performances actually came through, while at the same time attenuating some of the more edge elements like hard driving bass or piercing treble. Hip hop and reggaeton are styles that I tend to like a bit more, and frankly, there's nothing to say about them that I haven't said already. They're great with these, layered, detailed, and revealing without being overt or offensive. And of course, classical, which is the most important genre to me. I haven't really gotten into it here, but a lot of what applies to jazz applies to classical, at least the recordings. I was never anything less than elated. But I will say that the attenuation of the highest frequencies did make higher instruments like the violin and the flute, and even voices in opera ever so slightly muted in the highest harmonics, which maybe took away about 1% of the realism, which I never really missed. Although you can EQ it in if you really want, I guess. These are sensitive enough. So I'll be blunt. There was nothing I listened to with these that didn't sound great, and I couldn't ask for anything more. I truly enjoyed this. Take care.